It all started with a moment no one could ever forget. A terrified young girl cornered inside a deserted industrial warehouse, facing a wall of leather jackets, roaring engines, and hostile faces. And right beside her stood the one protector she trusted more than anyone in the world, a trained German shepherd who refused to take a single step back. What happened inside that warehouse would change the lives of everyone involved. And today, you're about to hear the truth behind the night a little girl gave a secret signal that even the toughest bikers couldn't ignore. Before we begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like this reach the world. The day had started like any ordinary morning for little Emma Carter, the K-9-year-old kid who loved drawing, humming silly tunes, and walking through town with her German shepherd, Shadow. For Emma, Shadow wasn't just a pet, he was her guardian, her companion, and the gentle giant who never left her side. Her uncle, a seasoned K-9 handler, had gifted Shadow to the family shortly after he retired from the force. And although Shadow was no longer active duty, everyone who knew him understood one thing: his instincts never switched off. Once a protector, always a protector. Emma had planned something sweet that morning. She wanted to surprise her dad with a drawing she'd worked on the night before, a sketch of him fixing a motorcycle with her and Shadow watching proudly. Her dad's workshop sat along a stretch of old warehouses, a quiet area on the edge of town where the hum of engines echoed through the steel walls. What Emma didn't know was that a dangerous biker crew had recently turned one of those abandoned buildings into their own hideout, a place no child should ever walk into. Emma approached her dad's workshop. She noticed something strange. The lights were off, the door was shut, and everything felt wrong. Her father never closed early. Concern bubbled inside her chest. Maybe he was in the next building, she thought. Maybe he'd stepped out to fix something. A metallic crash echoed from farther down the row, and a faint voice, or at least what Emma believed was her dad's voice, carried through the air. Without hesitation, she followed it. Shadow tugged back gently, sensing something she couldn't. His ears stayed tall and his body stiffened with each step. But Emma, too young to understand danger, loosened the leash and stepped inside the warehouse. The heavy metal door slammed behind her with a violence she had never heard before. The sound shot through her like a jolt. Before she could turn around, Shadow squeezed in beside her just as the door clanged shut, sealing them in. The moment she looked up, her heart nearly stopped. Dozens of massive men stood in a rough circle around her. Leather vests, tattoos, steel boots scraping the concrete, thick beards and cold stares. They looked less like people and more like shadows carved out of danger. The air smelled of cigarette smoke, oil, and trouble. Emma clutched Shadow's fur, feeling her hands tremble uncontrollably as her breath turned shaky and uneven. Shadow moved immediately, placing his body between her and the men. His head lowered, his ears locked forward, his stance tightened. He didn't bark, he didn't need to. Every move he made said one thing: stay back. The men shouted, their voices echoing through the vast warehouse like thunder rumbling off steel walls. Some mocked her, some laughed, some stepped closer just to watch her flinch. And then their leader emerged from the group, a towering man with copper-colored beard, arms thick as concrete pillars, and an expression that carried nothing but menace. His vest read Ripper, and the moment he stepped forward, the atmosphere shifted like a storm was rolling in. Ripper stared down at Emma with a twisted amusement, then at Shadow with annoyance that quickly darkened into anger. He questioned her, assumed things, blamed her father for debts she didn't understand, but Emma couldn't speak. Her throat felt dry, her knees shook, and her world narrowed to the one thing she still trusted: Shadow. When Ripper moved closer, Shadow didn't retreat. Instead, he released a deep, rumbling growl that shook the air. Some bikers stepped back instantly, recognizing a level of training far beyond a normal household pet, but Ripper didn't listen. He kept pushing forward, unaware he was one heartbeat away from triggering something that even he wouldn't be able to control. And that's when Emma lifted her hand, two small fingers barely steady, the secret signal her uncle had taught her. A signal meant only for emergencies. A signal only a trained K-9 would understand. Shadow's entire body changed in a single breath. The moment Emma raised those two trembling fingers, the warehouse seemed to freeze. The bikers who had been shouting and crowding in suddenly fell silent, as if something invisible had swept through the room. Shadow's breathing shifted, deepening into a steady rhythm, the kind he used only when his training switched from calm to tactical. His paws planted firmly on the ground, his spine straightened, and his eyes sharpened with a cold, precise focus that made even the toughest men step back. Emma's fear didn't vanish, but something steadier rose inside her trust. Shadow wasn't reacting like a pet anymore. He was responding like the defender he had once been trained to be, reading threats, calculating angles, and running protocols she could only imagine. The bikers sensed it too. What they thought was an ordinary dog now looked like a force they hadn't prepared for. Ripper, however, refused to acknowledge the shift. His pride was too loud, his anger too wild. He stepped forward again, a heavy boot stomping on the concrete hard enough to echo off the steel walls. The sound bounced around the warehouse like a warning shot, but Shadow didn't flinch. He leaned back slightly, distributing his weight the way K-9 units do before deciding whether to block, strike, or redirect. His growl deepened into something primal, a vibration that moved through the air with undeniable authority. Tension climbed so quickly that Emma could feel it tighten around her chest. One biker muttered under his breath that the dog wasn't normal, and another whispered something about military training, but none of that mattered to Ripper. He stepped closer, raising his arm as if to intimidate Emma. Shadow reacted instantly, moving with explosive speed but not recklessly. He didn't bite, didn't attack. Instead, he lunged with a sharp, controlled bark and hit Ripper's arm with his shoulder, knocking it aside before it got anywhere near the girl. The sudden precision of that move sent shockwaves through the entire group. Ripper stumbled backward, his boots scraping on the floor as the force caught him off guard. Several bikers flinched, some backing up instinctively. Shadow didn't chase him, he didn't even take a step out of formation. He simply returned to guarding Emma, eyes locked forward, breathing steady, ready to respond to the next threat. But the confrontation didn't end there. Ripper, embarrassed and furious, roared for his men to surround them. Boots thundered across the concrete as the circle tightened. Emma felt her heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. She backed up until her shoulder hit a stack of dusty crates, but Shadow moved with her, never breaking formation. Then chaos erupted all at once. One man swung a chain, another tried to grab Emma's backpack, and two more lunged from opposite directions. But Shadow moved like a blur, pivoting, blocking, redirecting. He wasn't attacking out of rage. Every move was measured, precise, meant to protect without escalating into lethal force. He ducked under the chain's arc so it struck only a metal barrel. He slammed his shoulder into the biker reaching for Emma's arm, sending the man collapsing to one knee. He intercepted the others with perfectly timed movements that left them stumbling over crates or slipping on patches of oil. The warehouse shook with shouts, clattering metal, and the frustrated growls of men who realized they weren't fighting a normal animal. This was a protector working within the boundaries he had been trained for. Emma pressed a hand over her mouth, watching him move with a mix of awe and terror. She whispered Shadow's name under her breath, not to command him, but because he was the only constant in the chaos. But even with Shadow's unmatched precision, the overwhelming number of bikers made it clear they couldn't hold this position forever. The gang wasn't slowing down, more were closing in. Some shouted orders, some cursed the dog, and others looked for weapons to use. Shadow could sense the danger escalating. His ears flicked, his eyes scanned frantically, and his muscles tightened in preparation for something beyond defensive maneuvering. And then he found it, an escape. Behind the crates Emma had been pushed against was a narrow gap, barely visible in the dim light. A normal dog wouldn't have paid attention to it, but Shadow, trained to identify exit points and protective routes, recognized its potential instantly. He barked twice sharply. Emma knew that signal. Her uncle had taught her what each bark meant, and this one meant move now. Fear clawed at her, but she trusted Shadow completely. She ducked into the narrow space, slipping between broken pallets and metal barrels. Shadow stayed with her, pushing her forward while keeping a steady eye on the gang closing in. Behind them, Ripper shouted orders, his voice echoing like a storm, commanding his men not to let the girl escape. Emma squeezed through the tight opening and entered a dark hallway that smelled of dust and metal. Shadow backed through the gap after her, never turning his back on the threat. His tail brushed the crates as he squeezed out, then he pivoted instantly to face the danger again. But the bikers were already rushing toward the narrow space, shouting, pounding on crates, trying to break through. Emma stumbled deeper into the hallway, her breath fast and shaky. Shadow nudged her forward again, guiding her down the dim passage where he hoped to find another escape. And then he smelled it, fresh air, a draft of wind from a side wall. Shadow pushed toward it. The next moment was chaos. The hallway felt narrow and endless as Emma and Shadow rushed through the dusty passage. Every breath Emma took was sharp and shaky, her small feet slipping across the gritty floor while Shadow stayed glued to her side, guiding her with quiet nudges and steady presence. Behind them, the distant roar of furious voices bounced off the metal walls as the bikers stormed through the narrow opening, determined not to lose the girl or the dog who had humiliated their leader. The danger wasn't over. It was getting closer. Shadow's ears flicked sharply toward the wall on their right. A faint stream of cool air slipped through a loose metal panel, carrying the scent of the outside world, freedom. Without hesitation, he pressed his shoulder into the rusted sheet, testing its strength. The metal groaned but didn't budge. Emma, trembling, placed her small hands against the panel and pushed with everything she had. It wasn't enough. Her voice cracked as she begged for help, and Shadow responded instantly. With a powerful shove, he rammed his body against the panel again. This time, the old metal surrendered with a screech, bending forward just enough to reveal a narrow crawl space bathed in pale daylight. Emma scrambled through first, dragging her backpack behind her. As she passed through the gap, the sounds behind them exploded, angry boots hammering the concrete, shouts echoing like thunder, fists pounding against crates as the gang closed in. Shadow backed out through the opening, never turning his back on the threat, his body coiled tightly in case one of the men tried to reach through. He slipped into the alley just as the bikers crashed into the hallway behind them. Fresh air hit Emma's face like a miracle, but the moment she looked up, her relief vanished. The alley outside wasn't a sanctuary, it was a trap. Rusted pipes clung to the brick walls and weeds grew through cracked concrete, but the danger came from the sudden burst of noise behind them. The metal panel shook violently as bikers slammed into it from inside. Then another sound cut through the chaos, the rumble of revving engines approaching from the far end of the alley. Reinforcements. Shadow's growl deepened, low and steady, vibrating through Emma's feet as he positioned himself between her and every angle of danger. His eyes tracked both ends of the alley. From one side, bikers were trying to break through the panel. From the other, a group of riders swung around the corner, engines roaring as they spotted the girl. Emma's breath caught in her throat. They were surrounded. The bikers advanced slowly, forming a half-circle around them, chains wrapped around wrists, boots crunching on gravel. Emma stepped back instinctively until she hit the cold brick wall. Shadow moved with her, his body lowering into full defense stance, tail stiff, muscles locked, every instinct focused on keeping her safe. The air tightened, thick with the threat of violence. Just as one biker lunged, ready to grab Emma, a piercing wail shattered the moment, sirens loud and close. Blue and red lights burst across the alley walls like a storm of color. Patrol cars screeched to a stop from both ends, blocking the exits as officers flooded out with weapons drawn. Commands echoed fiercely through the air, ordering the bikers to drop their weapons and step back. Shadow didn't relax, not yet. His loyalty held him firm beside Emma even as the officers formed a protective barrier around them. Within seconds, K-9 units, additional cruisers, and backup officers poured into the scene. The bikers froze, their confidence crumbling as they realized the dog's emergency distress chip, the one implanted during his years in service, had activated automatically when his stress levels spiked. Help had been rushing to them from the moment Shadow entered full alert mode. Through the mess of flashing lights and shouts, Emma heard a voice she recognized. Her father came sprinting down the alley, still wearing his oil-stained uniform, his face pale with fear and relief. She stumbled into his arms, sobbing into his chest as he squeezed her tightly, whispering thankfulness she barely heard through her tears. Behind them, Shadow finally eased, stepping closer as if to ensure she was truly safe. Officers handcuffed the bikers one by one, reading them their rights as the alley filled with the buzz of radios and the thundering beat of helicopter blades overhead. The crisis dissolved into order. The danger dissolved into justice. And Emma, still clinging to her father, looked down at Shadow with tear-filled eyes. This German shepherd had stood against an entire gang, fought through fear, forced open exits, calculated threats, and never left her side. He wasn't just a retired K-9. He was her protector, her guardian, her silent warrior. Her hero. As her father lifted her into the car, Shadow hopped in beside her, pressing his warm head into her lap. Emma wrapped her arms around him, whispering soft, grateful words as flashing lights faded behind them. Shadow had done more than save her life. He had shown the world the power of loyalty. And he wasn't going anywhere ever again. If you felt this story in your heart, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more powerful, emotional stories just like this one. Thank you for watching, stay safe, stay kind, and cherish the ones who protect you.